The Sharpest College Football Podcast. This is week 3 in review, brought to you as always by BuckMetrics. I am joined, as always, by Robert Martin in beautiful Canada. Robert, not the most fulsome week last week, but still a fun week, and reminds me of when I have a rough day at Santa Anita. I always say to myself, as many people do, even the worst day here is better than a good day at most other places, and that's my thought about last weekend.
Yeah, last week, far from the amazing weeks of college football we've had the last couple of weeks. But again, it's still college football. It's still amazing and crazy stuff happens, crazy upsets. It's still fun. I will say though, it's not their fault, but like last Sunday night slate, like the 10:30 slate was just absolute garbage. Like that was, I think, like the worst after dark slate. None of the games were competitive. None of them had any interest in me at all. For me at all, I think it was one was it like Cal San Diego State, and
Yeah.
that one was, I just didn't care at all. Yeah, but again, some of the early games though fascinating, and especially the early window. That early window was crazy, and I think we're going to talk about that now. But yeah, it was a kind of a bit of a lull in the season. A lot of teams were on buys. A lot of teams did have bye weeks, and that will obviously change very soon going forward.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're past the worst of the buys, at least until the SEC takes that week off in November that they always do. If this is your first time, this is our glossary. This has the metrics that we refer to throughout this podcast. So do a copy, paste this into your Sharpest College Football Podcast workbook, and refer to it throughout this episode and the rest of the year. And with that, we will start with who won week 3. I will go first here, and I posted this on Friday night. As of the end of Friday night games, the only team in all of college football with 2 road wins over a Power 5, and I'm still in the Power 5 habit, apologies, Power 4 teams, is UNLV. Remember when we did our Mountain West podcast, I was just really stuck on how to untangle it, and I limped into UNLV as a title game participant, and I talked myself into it later when we did our week 0, I think it was, or week 1 pod. I actually got a little bit on the Rebels to win the Mountain West just because they have probably the best path besides Boise. Little data point here on UNLV, just using Houston as a barometer. Donovan Smith of Houston is apex by game here, negative 13 against UNLV, then 135 against Oklahoma, I think, who has a legitimate defense, and a 97 against Rice. It looked like early when they had that tough, or they gave Houston a really tough game and shut them out. It seemed like they had gotten the defense up to speed. Last year was an offensive show. Now they're getting everything together. I think actually what's interesting is the quarterback position's a little, it's not the strong point, whereas basically that was a strong point last year. Also have a little Notre Dame icon there because the Irish did get their second road win over a Power 4 team with their win at Purdue on Saturday. So congratulations, Irish. You're in good company with the UNLV Rebels.
Yeah, shout out to UNLV. I didn't bet on UNLV in this game, but I wanted to at one point. I saw a plus 13.5 live, and I was very tempted to, but I didn't pull the trigger on it. Instead, I bet Jalen Daniels over 1.5 passing touchdowns, and that didn't work. But I did pass on this because my model did like UNLV a little bit. Again, it's early, and liking a team a little bit was not enough for me to jump into there for that game. But man, this team's really freaking good, right? Like, this team is also, I think, almost no longer a Mountain West team, but we'll talk a bit about that later. So what a week for them. They've graduated. But no, this team is a legitimate threat in the Mountain West. Boise also looked pretty good. They were competitive against Oregon. It's very possible the Mountain West is the team that whoever wins the Mountain West is the team that's going to potentially go to the college football playoff. This is a really good team, like a really good quarterback. It's just a good all around team. And I don't know if Kansas has problems or if this is just Jalen Daniels is looking really off this year. I don't know. I don't know if it's a him thing, if it's a Kansas thing. Their defense seems pretty not half bad. It just seems like a Jalen Daniels thing. And again, that in no way takes away from UNLV. This is like a very legitimate team. And I'm actually really happy to see this team. This is a team we would like. We called that immediately on week 1 against Houston. And this is a team I can't wait to bet for going forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how much value they retain. It seems like the world gets onto you when you win one of those, what they call like the island games, when you're one
Yeah.
of the only games on TV rather than winning in the middle of the Saturday. You tend to get a little more traction in terms of public following. All right, your week three winner. Go ahead here.
Yeah, so shout out to Oregon. We thought like people were like, is this team not good anymore? And that was a legitimate concern too. Like people thought this team might be over. And sure enough, they dominated their rival Oregon State in the sorry we destroyed your conference bowl. This was part one of it. There's another part to it as well. I've had Dylan Gabriel throwing for 291 yards. The bigger number there, though, and I've highlighted here, you can see there at the bottom. That's Dylan Gabriel running there. Actually, it's a quarterback sneak. He ran that all the way to the house, and look at that running lane they open up for him. Now you can see it there. That wide receiver near the 40 number. No idea, not a wide receiver. I guess that's some sort of. I guess it's a cornerback or something. No idea what that guy's doing. He's running the other way from the ball carrier, the defender. I don't know what he was doing. He had a shot at Dylan Gabriel, just didn't take it. But look at that massive lane they've opened up for them. They've completely blocked off the entire defensive line. And you can see that stat there. And again, this is obviously just one example for it, but look at that. You can see it on the right hand side 7.5 yards per rush, 240 rushes. This was the concern we had, and you voiced it, and that was the topic of our deep dive last week, and we were like, hey, if they don't fix this, this is a problem. And they, at least for now, against a Mountain West team, sorry Oregon State, they have seemed to do it, and Oregon State hasn't looked horrible too in those first two games. For now, at least Oregon maybe not on death watch. Maybe Oregon has figured out a way to block for runs. We'll see. Let's see if this is a turning point or if Oregon State is worse than we thought.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kept on thinking Oregon State lost a lot. I'm just not, when you even call them Mountain West, I don't even know how to peg them in relation to the Mountain West. It's going to be interesting when they play the Mountain West teams because I think probably the Mountain West teams might have kept more roster talent just because Oregon State lost Jonathan Smith. Just not really having a conference this year had to hurt more than just like maybe who's like a typical. God, there was a lot of turnover in the Mountain West too. But just say like Boise didn't lose anybody. Now they're the top of the UNLV. That's a good example. They lost Fafita because he had an amazing season, but the rest of the team pretty much stayed intact for the most part. They kept the Ricky White, I think is his name. And I think if you compare like a UNLV to an Oregon State, UNLV came back with more than what they could have or potentially should have. Better return on capacity. So I bring that up because I was thinking, let's Oregon State knows what they are, but then you go back and say, Jesus, Idaho was a horrible game for Oregon. So I had to make my own head hurt by seeing if I should couch this, but then it almost says how bad Oregon's game was against Idaho. In my deeper dive in part two, I'm gonna get into these, just a looks in a small sample size overreactions too, and this is a great example of it. About I explicitly said I'm not. What do I want to say? When I did that deeper dive, I basically said, look, I'm not telling you, but I'm saying this is something to keep an eye on. Again, stay tuned to part two of the deeper dive. That'll be pretty instructive on basically small sample size and just the wide variance from week to week in team performance too.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that looking on, I just called up the ESPN FCS coaches poll, and Idaho is the number 4 ranked Division 2 team. Now, so not bad. Again, obviously you should still be beating, and they, to be fair, they did beat them, not particularly convincingly, but
Yeah,
now there's two things here. One is it the fact that now Idaho is 2-1, 2-0 in their other games. Obviously, the one lost to Oregon. Is Idaho good, or were they like, oh man, they were competitive with Oregon? They're the number 3. Is this the snake eating its own tail? Probably,
yeah,
but
yeah.
but I think it's possible that hey, like maybe Idaho. I think we're gonna look back and be like, hey, Idaho was pretty good, and actually Boise was actually also pretty good, right? Like Boise could potentially be playing for the Mountain West title, right? Like we could look back and be like, hey, you know what? Idaho is in the like top the FCS playoff. I don't know what they call it. They don't have ESPN branding in the FCS. I don't know, but maybe we're looking at this and we're like, hey, Boise State was played for the Mountain and potentially even won the Mountain West too, right? They have a loss, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a non-conference loss. We could be looking at this and be like, hey, you know what? Those 2 games, those were actually against 2 pretty good teams. So maybe this is, and there's a lot of this in college football. And we're going to talk about this a lot more later with a lot of other teams. But I think maybe people overreacting to Oregon and their first 2 week games. Hey, maybe this team is actually better than they definitely shouldn't be ranked 9th. That's just insulting. But whatever, we'll see. But yeah, this team might actually be still pretty good.
There should be no teams ranked right now. It's way too early.
That's
It's
actually
all
fair.
guesses. The other thing too, as somebody who's on Boise over 9.5 wins, I will say if I have one concern about that team, it's definitely the defense. So it just there's a lot of data points. If there's one team that is God, Oregon, their schedule is very forgiving. So it's not like they're going to lose 3 or 4 games, but just it's interesting because there's a lot of data points for a team that really should be in the playoff. But I think there's a wide variety of how much of a factor they can be in the postseason. Literally, they could make the championship game, or I could see them get an early exit in a road game. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be a team to keep an eye on for sure. There's a lot of paths for them. All right, who lost week 3? I don't know because you're like 30 years younger than me. Are you familiar with the whole paper bag over your head gag? Because that was
That was
like big in the
the
70s, 80s, and 90s.
yeah, that was the Cleveland Browns, and yeah, I've seen this. Well, this is I guess one of the first memes. So yeah, I've seen this.
Yeah, obviously it's okay. I don't want to be seen going to this. So I thought that had thing been I don't know. I didn't think that existed in a TikTok world. I'll just say that. So props to the Seminole fans for putting up with just a brutal season and showing up in their paper bags. What are we going to say? Florida State stinks. They're hitting new lows every week. I still remain unconvinced by Seth Hennigan and look for a spot to fade him a little bit later. I did include here DJ Uyalingbe. Boy, what a hot start. 5 of 6 for 7 yards.
I saw this too. I don't. It was maybe it wasn't exactly this moment, but I remember looking into the game early, and I was like, "What the heck is happening? How do you go 5 for 6 for 7 yards and an interception? So you
Yeah.
completed 5 passes to your team and one to the other team, and you on your 5 passes you had 7 yards, like insane."
I yeah. I'd rather go 0 for 6, just rather than just reveal that they don't trust me to throw the ball more than 3 yards downfield. 1.2 per attempt, 1.4 per completion.
Yeah.
Jeez, yeah,
It's
it's
one,
rough, man.
yeah. What this is, I want to talk about this for 1 second. About, I also want to say that someone on Twitter pointed out that I think Florida State is I think it was like something like the 10th team, and there's a list of them. It's like the 10th AP top 10 team to start the season 0-3. And people were like, wow, that's really bad for Florida State. I'm like, wow, that's really bad for the AP poll. That should not happen. If you think, like, again, there are 120, I think 130 teams in FBS. If you're like, this is one of the top 10 teams, they should not be starting 0-3. Like, that
Yeah,
should not happen. That means you're not good at your job. Obviously, that's not clearly not every single AP voter has unanimously put, like, maybe someone was like a conscious defector. They're like, no, they're not. Shout out to that guy. But again, though, that just is an indictment of the AP poll. That's like, you guys have no idea what you're doing. Like,
yeah. No, if the consensus has you as number 9, your poll stinks. Okay,
yeah. And
sorry.
then you lose 3 straight. But no, the problem with Florida State is just the problem. Obviously, we point to
Yes,
DJ. We point and say this is clearly
there.
a problem. But there's
Yeah,
other problems here too,
yeah.
right?
That is
That's the thing.
a
Like,
problem,
a
not the
problem,
problem. Yeah,
a massive problem. Don't get us wrong. This is bad. But there's other problems too, right?
yeah,
The fact that, and again, you could see it there, 5 for 6 for 7 yards. They are like, you are throwing to the line of scrimmage. That's it. So basically, you're just calling screens. Okay, you can't get any yards on a screen. So that means your blocking sucks. Your defense is not great. 20 points like for Memphis, yeah, it's about fine. But Boston College destroyed you. You're letting on quite a lot of points there on defense against Boston College and Georgia Tech. But again, 12 points against a non-power 5 team. Like, what are you doing here? And the thing is, usually as the season progresses, team gets better. But you could arguably point a line
yeah.
down for this Florida State. It's getting worse each week. And there's like talk of Norvell being fired. Now, that I don't think that's happening this year, because
No,
not when you haven't.
he just
Yeah,
got re-upped after last season, and
yeah.
Alabama
And I think it's
going
very
after him.
clear that I think when we were not particularly sold on Florida State. We were like, maybe. I think we really discounted just how much they lost to the NFL, and then also the fact that it's weird because DJ was actually able to do something at Oregon State, and he's been able to do literally nothing here. And it's really weird why that is. Like, why is it the fact that, and again, it's not like he played like a schedule here at Florida State of Clemson, Oregon, Ohio State. If he played those three teams, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I could understand. But this is Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis. These are not like, it's not like he played Iowa State. Like, he should be able to do things against these defenses. And if this is the best you
Yeah.
can do, but again, problems on defense, problems on the offensive line, not enough playmakers, right? And also can't run the ball. Their running game has been horrific.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that when everything breaks, this stuff like this. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just point out that last year I did that breakdown of DJ's splits by basically everybody not named Oregon and Washington, and then Oregon and Washington, and his apex dropped by about 60 to 70 points when he
Mhm.
played like grown up defenses. So, but I don't, that's what's really scary is he hasn't played any grown up defenses yet. Georgia Tech is nice. Memphis is functional. Boston College, I don't know how good a defense is going to be when you have a new head coach and he's an offensive coordinator, wild card. So when they get into some of the better teams in the ACC, now what exactly that is to be determined. Aside from Miami, nobody impresses, and good luck to everybody putting your chips behind Mario at the poker table. I'll just say that
Mhm.
the ACC is just a wide open. I we were all flummoxed, which is why we went deep in picking our conference champs. And I feel no more informed today than in July.
The ACC is wide open. I actually got somehow, I think I got like a $2 free bet for Bet365. I'm just like, Boston College win the ACC. I don't care. I'm not like, whatever. They could win it. Who knows? I don't even. The odds look nice. Virginia Tech, huge question marks. SMU, dead. Florida State, also dead. Florida State, even more dead. Clemson, okay, but that's okay. You beat App State. Congrats. Do you want the ACC championship title now? This is not like Boston, sure, Boston College. Like, they seem pretty good. They did well against Missouri. Yeah, they could win. Sure, why not? That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, not bad. All right, elsewhere in Florida. So apparently this frustrates me. So the boosters apparently have together the money to fire Billy Napier. And what's frustrating to me is just I've done a little clip on the bottom part here about these idiots couldn't even get together the money and couldn't get things together when they were trying to get Jaden Rashada to school. And Napier went on a limb and said, "Yeah, these guys are going to hook you up." And then these idiots completely failed. And Jaden Rashada goes to Arizona State and now Georgia. This kind of stupidity just if he has to go, he has to go. That's fine. But maybe I overthink this, and maybe coaches are different from me. But as someone who's been an executive for quite a while here, if I do something really dumb, I understand that it could make it very hard to hire the next person. And when I just see the collective that they can't get the money together for a quarterback I desperately need because he's not named Graham Mertz, and they screw that up, but they get the 26 million together to get rid of me. If I'm another coach, I see that I'm really concerned about why do I want to go here?
Yeah, there's a lot of giant question marks and exclamation marks all over pretty much all of this. Yeah, the best quarterback you could get was Graham Mertz, who was basically like bargain bin. At that point, was good last year, very questionable this year. We're going to get into that in a minute, but like, there's a lot of questions about how they built this team, how they have recruited, how this team is, what it's even doing. I don't know what it's doing, especially on defense. I have no idea what it's doing on defense. On offense, like, you lose Travis Etienne because apparently he was told that he was not going to be the starting running back. So he's just like, cool. He just went to Georgia, and now he's their starting running back. So yeah, you can now win. What are you doing? How is this talent value working, right? And I mean, okay, DJ Langway could be good. We'll talk about that in a second. But again, quarterback is one piece of this, right? Like, you're taking long shots at quarterback, and okay, maybe you need those to pay off, but like the rest of your bets aren't paying off. Like you shouldn't be taking long shot bets on safety or cornerback or offensive lineman, and apparently you are. Like you need to be having a consistent team outside of those key positions, and you can't even field that. There's a lot of questions. And okay, you're gonna apparently like this whole thing with Rashada. I have no idea what happened. It was sketchy from the beginning. I don't know if this was something Napier cooked up. He was clearly involved. I know eventually court litigation will say he wasn't involved, but he was 1,000% involved. But the thing is, it's okay. Now they're going to scrounge up $25 million to get rid of him. I guess they have to do that. They basically said they were going to do it, but yet they didn't. And now somehow he's still the coach. But at this point, look, you got embarrassed at home against Miami, an in-state rival at home, and then you also got embarrassed at home against Texas A&M, a team that lost to Notre Dame, a team that then lost to a MAC team. This is not good. These are progressively things that are not good. And I like, who do you even hire at this point? People are like Lane Kiffin. I'm like, well, he seems pretty happy at Ole Miss. He
Yeah.
seems pretty happy. I don't think he's really clamoring to go ahead.
That is a perfect example of Kiffin has been able. Could he maybe just, how do I say this? Just if we go just by the specifics of the schools, could you attract a better athlete to Florida than Mississippi? Absolutely. But that's a perfect example of this NIL mess that they've done. If I'm him, I wouldn't even entertain it because I know that I've got a proven collective that doesn't going to screw it up. If I want somebody, I can get the money for them for the most part. Maybe I'm not going to be able to pull guys that Alabama might get, but I'm not going to have something stupid like this where these idiots in upstate Florida can't get it together. And all of a sudden, my quarterback that I thought I had is now playing for my rival in Georgia. Gee, that I can't state enough just how much that hurts.
There's a lot of pieces for that, right? For Lane Kiffin, right? You're sitting there at Ole Miss. You very clearly have the support of all the boosters. This that program is firing on all cylinders, right? You took a gamble on Jackson Dart. It paid off. You've built around him in the transfer portal. That is a very stacked team for this year.
Yeah,
And okay, yeah, maybe that all goes away next year as it naturally does. But guess what? You now get to say, hey, this is what we're able to do. We need this quarterback. We'll get someone from the transfer portal. We'll recruit someone. You're able to do that. And because you have the support of the boosters, they're not going to be calling for your head immediately. If you go 8-4
exactly.
next season, if you
Yep,
go 7-5 next season, that's fine. Hey, guess what? Because Ole Miss is probably going into the college football playoff, right? So they're not going to be gunning for his head if they go 7-5 next season because they know it's going to rebuild and be potentially good. Lane Kiffin actually is one of the more he's developed one of the more consistent programs there in the end. And okay, I guess you could easily get Jamie Chadwell. That's probably someone you could very easily get. I don't think Liberty is going to dig too much into that, but they've been a little iffy this year. They're starting to look a little better, but they're still a little iffy this year. I'm not sure why. They should have improved, not gotten worse. But Jamie Chadwell would still be a good hire, but it's just the question is like when you see this, and it's the same kind of thing as Auburn, right? It's like when you see this kind of dysfunction, and it's it's weird that there was no problem for Texas A&M boosters to get rid of Jimbo Fisher. They're like, yep, whatever, we're gonna pay the money. That's fine. That's gone. And it was not even a question. But people are like, oh, $25 million is a lot of money. So I'm fairly sure they paid Jimbo a lot more money than that to go away. And it's weird to me that this is now suddenly $25 million. Like you have to fire him. And this is over now at this point. You can't have those losses at the Swamp at home that bad. And it's again, the schedule gets tougher. These are the easy games.
yeah.
You're supposed to be 3-0 right now if you haven't had a shot to save yourself. This is only going to get worse. I don't even know what you do if you're Florida. Yeah, there's a lot of long shots you could take on. There's value you can find in places. You could find a Jamie Chadwell. Maybe you could pluck Matt Rule from Nebraska, but I don't. With the NIL the way it is, see, that's the thing, right? Maybe you could do that, but with NIL the way it is, if you're established at a program and you do pretty well in that program and you have the support of the boosters, like if you're in the Big Ten, there's no longer the division. So basically, if you come like third or fourth, you could definitely go to the playoff, right? So you don't need to like it's all based on where you can get the money from. And if you're at a place that has a big donor network, you don't need to go anywhere. You're totally fine there. So
Yeah.
Florida has a deep problem here, and I don't know how you fix it. There's crazy things like bring back Urban Meyer. I don't know if that's a good idea. Probably not. But this is where I don't even know what you do at this point. I don't even know how you fix this problem.
I don't know. We'll see. And they're like you said, their schedule is so tough. So it's not like he's going to coach his way out of it, where they can't make him. They can't make him keep him.
Yeah.
So They're just probably getting their everything together from a legal standpoint. All right. I don't know what your problem is here with the Badgers. Come on.
Yeah, this was bad. Yeah, Bama destroyed them on Jalen Milrow. Absolutely torched them here, 42-10. Their starting quarterback is now done for the season, but he wasn't particularly. He was okay at the start, but then they brought someone in who was worse than Tyler Van Dyke has been. Like, look, you can see here. There's a picture of an completely wide open Alabama receiver catching a ball for like 10 yards.
Oh,
Yeah, no, it's bad. And what is Wisconsin season is functionally done at this point. Okay, maybe you can get to a bowl game, you can scrape out a win here, but there's a lot of deep problems here. What is this team? Is this an air raid team? Is this a running team? Clearly, it's not a defensive team. But yeah, I like the jury's still out on Alabama. We don't know if Alabama is as good as it seems. A weird game against USF. And at times they struggled a little bit against Wisconsin, but then after Tyler Van Dyke was out, they just blew the doors off. But yeah, it just uh, this is bad. I don't know what they're doing here. They've
well,
got some deep problems they got to figure out here in Wisconsin.
the good news is they have a week to recover. They're off this week. And if you like what you see here in that little picture that you posted, you'll get a lot of that because their next game is at USC in 2 Saturdays. So I think we might be seeing quite a bit of what you're seeing over here with guys open galore downfield.
Yeah,
Yeah, I tell you what, as a USC fan, yeah, a brand new quarterback. His first start's going to be on the road. It'll be his first ever start, first conference game, first conference road game, all that good stuff. That lines up very nicely for USC. And hopefully, I did not jinx anything. All right, I've got a weird victory lap here. Guy I like on Twitter, Ben Carey, he's a very good follow. Had a little disagreement with him. He said, look, Texas State is the sharp play here, so on and so on. I said, look, I just didn't know what ASU was. I was pretty convinced that they were going to be sneakily horrible this year. They had a couple of really good games to open up the season. I said, clearly, I don't have a read on this team. So I just passed. That's why I included the picture of the guy reading the racing form here because it only took me like literally about 33 years to learn at the racetrack that one of the most important qualities that one can develop and not lose all your money is basically understanding when to pass a race. And I actually had the discipline. Remember, we actually broke this one down, and I said, "Look, I was looking forward to betting on Texas State this game, but Arizona State scares me. They're way better, and I don't have a read on them, and their metrics are pretty good. Sad to see that Texas State lost. Just doing a victory lap on this. When one of the things that I've figured out this year, like I said, I have it where I have an approach now in those first 4 weeks until we have until I have my metrics. I basically will just say, okay, who do I think is going to be overvalued and undervalued by the market coming into the season? And if I'm proven wrong, great. I won't bet on or against those teams anymore. Here's who I'm basically coming into the season. If you caught our previews, I was pretty much bearish on the teams in the left hand column and bullish on the ones on the right. And Texas Tech clearly they're just a wild card. I'm not saying they're good, but I don't think they're overvalued or undervalued. I think you just can't bet them. And SMU and Virginia Tech, just a string of duds there between those two teams. So I'm just not betting on them, and I'll just wait until week 5 when I have my metrics. Overall, I think I was pretty good on this. And again, you got to find the right spot basically to bet on these teams. And if there's a team that you just, in those first couple of weeks that I had no read on, or basically the first couple of weeks basically contradicted what I thought, you don't have to bet every game. There's 50 or so every week. It's nice to be able to pass them and still have fun on a Saturday.
yeah, I agree with that. I think yeah, Texas Tech is just completely wild card. I have no idea if they're good or not. I got nothing on that. But this list is like pretty intact at this point, honestly. Like it's a couple of misses here or there, a couple of arguable ones. I think Memphis, you could maybe knock off that. But again, this is a pretty long list both ways, and a lot of these are amazing calls here, and it's mostly what we've thought of. And yeah, like it's sometimes you don't have to bet on every game, and you have to pick your spots, see where you see value, and exploit that. And that's what we've been doing, and it's been working so far. Yeah, we're gonna have to see as we go forward here because we're gonna learn a lot more about these teams as we start getting into conference play, and it's gonna be really interesting when we see this. So yeah, I'm excited to see what like. I think I'm starting to get a good feel for some of these teams, but teams change mid-season all the time, so we'll see how this looks.
Okay. Stay tuned to part two, my deeper dive again on that too.
Yeah.
We've got some interesting info on that. Also, just a victory lap for both of us because really, just all three of us, you, me, and Isaiah, in the Big Ten preview, we said, look, this people are just not understanding what a complete rebuild Michigan is looking at on offense. This isn't David Shaw taking over, like I said, taking over with Andrew Luck at quarterback at Stanford. We were all skeptical to varying degrees, from really skeptical to extremely skeptical. Just using Arkansas State here as a barometer for just how bad Michigan's passing game has been. So they played three opponents here: Central Arkansas, Tulsa, and Michigan. Central Arkansas and Tulsa are not exactly the gold standard of passing, and yet they've each exceeded Michigan's apex against Arkansas State by what, 87 and 112 apex points. Announced today that Alex Orji is replacing Parker. What's his name? Warren. What I don't even. Sorry, don't understand. I appreciate you're a Southern California kid and you've overcome cancer. Good for you. But boy, you are not an awesome quarterback. So you know what? We told you so, everybody.
Yeah, like again, this game was relatively close for a lot of it. It was a bit further than it looks because Arkansas State had a garbage time touchdown. But again, it's Arkansas State, guys. Like, what are we doing here? This should not have been even remotely close. That 22-point spread should have been nowhere near enough. I don't. This is insane. I don't understand how, like, this team isn't good. I don't understand. I think they're the 17th ranked team for some reason, somehow. On Friday night before the weekend, FanDuel gave me a look ahead line: Michigan versus USC. For some reason, the money line was USC minus 136. I just unloaded on that. Now it's not that anymore. It's now the line was 2.5. Then it was now it's minus 5.5. Still unloading on that. Still, I'm not. That's not even close to, like, this is not a good team. Now, could this be a good team one day? Not this year, but in a future year when they have a new quarterback and rebuild, sure. But this is not it for this. This team is not good this
Yeah,
year. That's like,
yeah,
it's. I don't understand why we have to say this, but it's not. I have a bet on FanDuel, and the line I tell you on this is insane.
that's right.
Michigan to
Yeah,
not make the college football playoff minus 110.
it's crazy.
What? That mortal, like, it's done. Just give me the money now. Like, literally, like, it's done. Like, it's not happening. Okay, like, sure, but that was a. I mean, I'm sure if you would bet against Florida State making the college football playoff, you get plus money on that. But it's not even close. This is not a good team. One day maybe they could be a good team, but like not definitely not this year. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is.
no, I think there will be an opportunity because people are not going to get like what a horrible rebuild. And Moore has a thin resume too. He's probably going up the learning curve if he's a good coach. All right, your victory lap. So this is where you tell us all, hey, I knew Narduzzi's an awesome coach.
No, I'm just. I want to. The thing is, again, this week was weird, a kind of thin week, and we covered a lot of it earlier. But I was just, people were like, West Virginia, they finally figured it out. I'm like, I don't think they did, and they definitely haven't. I don't understand why Pittsburgh is 3-0. I really hope they don't decide to rank this team for some reason, because clearly they're not a top team. But I feel like that's about to happen because we're going to start running out of ranked teams really fast. But this is, Pittsburgh's not a good team, and you thought you'd figure this out, and you lose. Now it's away, but this is now two pretty rough losses for West Virginia now in two back-to-back weeks. And oh no, sorry, they lost week one, they won week two, then they lost. They got blown out by Penn State, losing to Pittsburgh. Like, this is rough for this team. This team has not figured it out, and I don't know why people thought they did, but they definitely have not. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of, I think, people that thought they were being sharp, just landing on Garrett Green having a good season last season, with the Big 12 being a little difficult to sort out with Texas and Oklahoma leaving. But agree, man, it's not working for Neil Brown there.
Yeah.
All right, this boy, get ready, people. This is going to be a long one here. My week three overperformer and underperformer both is South Carolina, who was extremely gutsy. I'm. This is all just like advisedly, so don't conclude early here. They played really. They came out to a great start against LSU as a 6 point home dog. They got a great game from Rocket Sanders. They were getting a great game from their quarterback Lenore Sellers, who then got hurt towards the end of the first half, but he was just having an amazing game. That is not a that can be a tricky defense if you're not really sound defensively. And South Carolina was making LSU look really bad. So overperformed in how well they they came out against a 6 point favorite at home. You know, and then they've lost their starting quarterback. They're relying on Robbie Ashford, which we'll get to a little bit later. You can see here there's 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Garrett Nussmeier, LSU quarterback, throws basically a pick six. And literally, South Carolina is up by 4. They could put the game away at this point. But they got an absolutely just ridiculous, stupid, unnecessary roughness. Basically, just a blindside block on the quarterback, which just didn't have to happen. It was totally away from the play. Basically cost them a touchdown. And you can see that basically after 3 yards and three plays and 2 yards, and they punted. Literally, they could have. After you've overperformed to this point, just to do such a brain dead thing, you can't do that when you have a chance to pull off a great upset here. South Carolina gets the ball back. Sorry, LSU gets South Carolina. Then they punt. LSU gets the ball. They basically are looking at a 4th and 3 at the South Carolina 38. Thank you so much to I don't know if it was McDonough or I think McDonough did this game. He pointed out that the students actually had all gone to the bottom part of the stadium bowl in advance of rushing the field. And so they see LSU having to go for it on 4th and 3 at the South Carolina 38. And what's the one thing you can't do there? Is the defensive offside. That's exactly what South Carolina did. My God, come on. So, of course, what happens then? Then LSU just goes down the field. They get a touchdown with 1:12 left. Just that defensive stupid penalty just keeps them alive. Leads basically directly to LSU touchdown. LSU takes the lead. And yet, then we get to less than a minute left. Actually, South Carolina somehow moves the ball there with Robbie Ashford at quarterback, which God bless the kid. He was horrible at Oregon. He was even worse at Auburn. He actually started, I think, a couple games. He saw some action. When I saw him in the game, I thought, there's no way this is going to happen. There's no way this is going to happen. And then what happens? On 3rd and 8, he completes a 31-yard pass, which just it seemed absolutely impossible. You've struck gold here. You found a 4-leaf clover. He's never going to do that again. You finally you're in good shape. He took you out of a 3rd and long. And what do? They're hurrying up, even though they have 2 timeouts. Then they get a false start penalty because their guys aren't set, even though there's 35 seconds left and you're at the 42. You've got 2 timeouts left. You don't have to hurry that much yet. Just stupid. Then they somehow, after that false start, they only get 2 plays off here, which is just, and Shane Beamer I was scared about something bad happening. So he leaves his field goal kicker with a 49-yard field goal that he barely missed. I'm thinking if they didn't have that 5-yard penalty, it probably would have been good. It was that close that he was really close. They just find a way to lose, and you're thinking if it comes down to a field goal. Shane Beamer, I put up his experience here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years as a special teams coach. If you remember, his dad was like the best special teams coach ever in the history of college football, Frank Beamer. And you're missing a field goal. They did so well in spots, and yet they just found a way to lose the game in multiple paths. They're my overperformer and underperformer for the week.
Yeah, I mean, this is a South Carolina team that struggled to put away Old Dominion a couple of weeks ago, then destroyed a
Yeah,
Kentucky team. Then now they almost took down LSU. I don't know what this team is. Is this a good team? Is this a bad team? I think it might be good, maybe, but it's insane. Yeah, I don't know what the South
but not
Carolina
well
team is.
coached. If you're when you're that, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what the heck. And again, this is without even. This is with like first year quarterback too, right? Like I expected this team to 100% regress after losing Spencer
yeah.
Rattler, but they apparently haven't. They've apparently come better somehow. I don't know. This is just the SEC. Sometimes anything can happen with some of these teams. It's crazy that the SEC does weird things sometimes. But yeah, no, 100%. This game was back and forth. I have no idea what LSU is doing. I think they're a good team, but I think sometimes they play like not a good team, especially on defense. Yeah, it's I don't know. They definitely overperformed expectations, but they also definitely underperformed expectations. They definitely should have
Yeah.
won this game. They definitely should have won this game, but they somehow didn't. Yeah, maybe LSU overperformed expectations, but then also they underperformed because it shouldn't have been that close. But then hey, they won somehow. So yeah, I got nothing. This game was just insane. This was one of those crazy games in the in the 1 o'clock time slot.
It was a spiritual continuation of that weird Arkansas at Oklahoma State game where it was just
Yes.
weird. All right, you've got a few here.
Yeah,
We've got
so
many here actually.
yeah, most of these are just quick hits here. That's why. So Washington State again, shout out for the upset in the part 2 of the You Destroyed Our Conference Bowl. They took down Washington. Again, people didn't think that was going to happen. They thought Jed Fish would have Washington under control. Clearly, he does not. Washington State it's weird. Like Washington State, even under Cam Ward, didn't look this good, but they actually do look really good now after losing their actually they technically didn't lose the Pac-12. They actually now own the Pac-12. They are the Pac-12 now. They were part of it. Now they are the Pac-12. But they've definitely lost a lot of money, and now somehow they're better. I don't know. That's weird. Sam Houston, this was a team that was arguably the worst team in college football for most of last year.
Yeah.
And they're 2-1, beating Hawaii at home. Now Hawaii away, but still Hawaii's not a bad team. Hawaii almost upset UCLA a couple weeks ago, and then you lay the smackdown on them. God, UCLA, that's just a dumpster fire. But again, like you're in the Conference USA. This team could probably go to a bowl game. Like actually, this team is actually like legit. And Boston College, this spread was I think 14 and a half. That wasn't even close to what it was. They lost this by 6. They had a lead in some points in this game. I think they were leading 14-3 at one point, and then Missouri came back. But like Missouri is one of the top teams in the country, and you almost took them down, and you were competitive with them throughout. Like Boston College again. I said it earlier in the pod, whatever, they could win the ACC legitimately. This team could actually be like really good. There might be something with coaches who go to the NFL and come back, and they might be better than people think they are. Yeah, shout out to Boston College. That team might actually be legit. They may have actually fixed Boston College by getting rid of Jeff Hafley and bringing in the can't remember the name
O'Brien.
O'Brien from New England Patriots. Yeah,
Yeah.
this team might be legit.
Yeah, and you got one more here?
Yeah, one more here. FAU. So it's really funny because we saw the first 2 games for FAU, and they were
Yes.
horrible. And we're like, Cam Fancher is also horrible. And I was like, they could lose to Florida International, and we all kind of bet Florida International.
Yeah.
But then FAU was like, hey, you know what? Our quarterback, he sucks. He's horrible. So instead, let's just become Army. And then they became Army. And then they lost to Army, and then we will now become our opponent, and they've become Army now. Look at that. 259 yards on the ground. Their quarterback threw for 161 for 36.9 QBR. That's horrible, but they won the game in dominant fashion. So shout out to FAU for adopting their enemy's tactics. Like that people thought I thought this team was going to be like 0-3, like not even close to a bowl game, but like they may have some life here. So they've decided they're Army now. So yeah.
Yeah, just some reactions there. I will say that Cam Fancher with 161 yards is hugely overperforming for him, even if it is against FIU.
That's a positive.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of sharp people I know were on FIU. My buddy Hambone texted me. He said, I have a 3-team dog parlay. And the first one I said is, yep, FIU's in there, right? He said, yeah. We all saw that one coming. That Missouri game, Boston College at Missouri, I don't know if you saw at one point there was a 2nd and 59 for Missouri. They had 2 personal foul penalties on the same play, one during the play and one after the play. Never seen a 2nd and 59, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sam Houston, I was to be determined, but a lot of sharp people I know like them coming into the season. I couldn't really see the case why, other than like Shoemaker kid, Keegan Shoemaker, I think it was his name, was no
Yeah.
longer with the team. I guess he was holding everything back. Boy, maybe they could have been good because I remember they had a decent defense at times last year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I have actually just a straight underperformer.
What happened here?
These numbers are gruesome and it's half. That's the thing. 273 yards passing and 142 rushing at half for Texas Tech. Just north. I hadn't even gotten home from my favorite Mexican restaurant for my traditional Saturday morning breakfast, and I see the message from Isaiah just saying, "Did North Texas not know there's a game today?" So I just saw the score and I said, "Yep, there's no need in chasing this one down on the multi-view." Man alive, it seems like they could have had 100 if they wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know what happened here. That one is crazy. It's yeah, it's not. This game should have been competitive, but just Texas Tech just absolutely blew them out. And maybe it's a North Texas thing, maybe it's a Texas Tech thing. I don't know, but just a beatdown. And I think sometimes those happen, and it's like whatever. But that was just very weird that happened. I don't know what happened there at all, but yeah.
Yeah, North Texas, their defense is just clearly legitimately bad. I don't know if you remember after week one, South Alabama, who they played in week one, actually had a top 10 quarterback in Apex and a top 10 receiver in player Ryan. So now they've got two really bad defensive efforts there. And yet, stay tuned to part two. I still might be tempted. We'll see. Yeah, you have a problem with 3 points here, Robert? Come on.
Yeah, it's what this is. Baylor's not even a good team, and you put up 3 against Baylor. This is a team that we liked them last year, and then they just collapsed in the second half of last year, and we're like, what happened? And now we didn't touch them this year, thank God,
Mm.
because just what is this? This is just an absolute beatdown. And yeah, this Air Force team is not good.
Do you remember? I don't know if you remember. Like I was just agog that still had Phil Steele had them as second place in the Mountain
Yeah,
West.
that's right. And we said we don't because they have to replace the entire offensive line, right? Yeah.
Literally, they were like pinks and zeros all across like the returning talent metrics. There's nothing here. And
Hmm.
I remember saying, okay, maybe this is just like you really believe in Air Force, but this is you really have to believe in Air Force, just like the whole system. And like we've said, it's a weird year in the Mountain West, but it ain't that weird where that's going to work. Yeah, I've got a good nugget on them coming up in a little bit too, later in part one here. Which brings us to things that are annoyed Robert. And I guess you're going to talk about Jerome Powell.
Yeah, so this is partly about that. Obviously, we're not going to talk about the Federal Reserve. So as people know, as many of our listeners probably know, this week the Federal Reserve will have their interest rate meeting where they set interest rates. They're very likely to cut them. You could say whatever you want about that decision or not, but I'm just gonna talk a little bit about that decision and how it applies to college football and how something that how it applies to it annoyed me this week for college football. So obviously they've decided now that they have to cut interest rates because the economy isn't doing great. So people are like, there's kind of two schools of thought on this. Some people say that the Fed should be cutting the federal interest rate 25 basis points, and some people are saying 50. The people that are saying it should be 25, it may not be enough to help the economy, but if they do that, the market won't panic. It's fine. It's expected they're going to cut interest rates, glide path down, the stocks will go up. But if the Fed cuts 50 basis points, maybe it'll help the economy and stable reception. But then people are going to think the Fed knows something they don't, so people are going to panic. And people are going to be like, oh no, they cut 50 basis points. What do we know? And then people are projecting that the stock market is going to collapse on Wednesday if they cut 50 basis points. So this is this insane scenario where it's okay, if we fix the problem, then people are going to panic and people are like, oh my God, there's a problem. They had to fix the problem. But if there is the problem, then basically, if you pretend there's no problem, and then you don't fix the problem, if there actually is a problem, then you're screwed. But if you don't fix the problem and there is a problem, then you're also equally screwed, right? So this is this weird dichotomy where you have to make a decision, and we'll see what Jerome Powell does on Wednesday. But I want to show how two head coaches in college football addressed a similar issue. So Florida this week, they opted for the 25 basis point cut. As you can see here, they gave Graham Mertz and DJ Langway about equal snaps, right? 15 throws for Mertz, 13 for Langway, and you saw the result. They lost to Texas A&M's backup quarterback at home. Not great. Auburn, however, opted for the 50 basis point cut. They said Peyton Thorne is the mole. We are going to put Hank Brown in. And okay, yeah, it's New Mexico. This is far from the best defense ever, but they straight up won the game and they dominated the game. And look, he didn't throw any interceptions. That's a massive improvement from last week, right? They actually fixed the problem. And my model actually thinks Auburn's one of the top teams in the country now. Distant, and again, early data, but like my model's like, hey, Auburn's not bad, which is crazy. I didn't think it would say that. All just because you got rid of them all. You cut 50 basis points. You fixed the problem. And Florida decided, well, no, because if we bench Graham Mertz, people are going to say there's a problem. It's like, there's a problem. Fix the problem. Don't half fix the problem, because now you have a bigger problem. Because now, who are you going to start now? Are you going to start Mertz? Are you going to start Langway? What are you going to do here? You can't, like, this is what annoys me, is the fact that if you've said, okay, Graham Mertz is the problem, we need to move on, then you fully commit to Langway, you have him start, you have him finish the game, and whatever happens, and you say, we're developing DJ Langway, we've moved on from Graham Mertz. We've fixed the problem. But in this case, you decided, no, we're going to do like half and half. We're going to start Mertz, and then he's not going to do well, so then we're going to throw Langway in halfway through the game, and then he's going to get roughed up, and then we're going to put Mertz back in and go back and forth. No. If there's a problem, you think you have a problem, fix the problem. If not, because it's insane. Because if you're like, if we try to fix the problem, people are going to realize there's a problem. Like, there is a problem, so try to fix the problem. Don't just Auburn could be good. This could have fixed their problem. Maybe they'll be good this year. Maybe the loss to Cal will be good. They'll have a good season. They'll go to a bowl, cover their over, whatever. I don't know. I don't know what Auburn's going to do this year, but at least they tried to fix the problem. Florida has not tried to fix the problem. They tried to do a half measure and it has fixed nothing and now created more problems. And Billy Napier's probably gonna get fired. So that's what annoyed me, the tying the federal interest rate to Florida and Auburn. There you go.
I like what you did there. When I saw this, I'm like, what is this about? But I like the explanation and the analog. That's actually good. I do have a little bit of disagreement with your model, and I'll get to that in part two, just for some context on the Auburn. Not a shot at Mr. Brown, but just some context about exactly what Auburn accomplished versus New Mexico. All right. My Narduzzi Award, now don't misinterpret this. This is not obviously Indiana winning as I think we all expected Indiana to beat UCLA. Didn't think it would be that severe. Interesting that we did say, hey, Indiana's not screwing around, but I didn't see what they win by 29. I just didn't think they had that much on offense, but clearly they do. So this is not a Narduzzi Award for Deshaun Foster. This is basically for UCLA's, I don't know if you just inept or overmatched or under budgeted, under resourced, whatever. But the hire was so bad. It made no sense at all. I, it makes no sense at all if it's anything other than college football particularly at an under resourced school that cares much more about basketball than football. So in that regard, I guess it makes a lot of sense for UCLA. But I just, this was so dumb when he wrote it. Stu Mandel, noted Big Ten expert, so this is right in his wheelhouse, as this is a Big Ten story. He gave the hiring of Deshaun Foster a B, which is so dumb, especially if you look at what came right behind a B minus. Oh yeah, A&M got Mike Elko. What's he done? Oh, he only took Duke to back bowls in his first two seasons. I don't know how you can possibly rate this. Now, his little thing about, oh, the players and the fans like him because he's a UCLA legend and all this. Great. You know what that got them? Here is, I don't remember how I came up with this, but I think I just Googled empty Rose Bowl. God bless the IU cheerleaders making their first trip to the Rose Bowl forever. Hey, it's almost game time. And guess what? Nobody's there. No, the fans are not buying into the Deshaun Foster hype. And here, shout out to my buddy last week who texted me with the whole touchdown Jesus story. And I had to tell him, yeah, Colt McCoy's a horrible announcer or whatever that went. He was at the game. Shout out Randy. He was there with my other buddy, Andy. And he just sends a group text saying, yeah, there's some great seats available for this. Apparently the boosters are not on the Deshaun Express. So look, maybe he gets them to a bowl at some point, but this was just an insipid hire. And cheerleading it, just like Mandel did, they get the Narduzzis. And just here's, if you're wondering if I'm a little tough on the guy, look, Deshaun Foster he actually went to high school in Tustin, which is just up the road from me. I actually have lunch 2 or 3 times a week in Tustin. It's that close. Just an absolute legend in high school, an awesome running back. He was great at UCLA, obviously had a nice pro career as well. But look at this resume. Robert, this is the head coaching resume of somebody that should be at New Mexico, not UCLA. And again, hey, you get to coach for your alma mater who you love. Awesome. Good for you. I'm not begrudging him at all. You're looking at this resume and saying, this is our guy. You got 1 year as a student assistant, 2 years as a grad assistant. Then you have 7 years as a running backs coach, all in college. And now you're a head coach? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You know what my fear was? My fear as a USC guy was that they were going to be smart and hire Brennan and Marion. And you know what that takes? Insight and money. And they have neither there. But Stu Mandel gives it a B. So I don't know. End of my sermon. Again, not against Deshaun Foster. Happy he's living his dream and coaching his alma mater. But boy, what a horrible hire.
One quick point before I talk about it. What a horrible Wikipedia doing Deshaun Foster dirty there. What is that picture of him? It's so bad. And it's like, what? This is the worst picture of Deshaun Foster ever. Again, like, this is extremely questionable. A guy who was a Texas Tech running back coach, and then your running back coach, you're like, yeah, that guy should be our head coach. That is very iffy. Like, the definition of iffy. So yeah, not the greatest hire. But again, it speaks to the point that like we sit here in the off season, and just because other people assess hires poorly or strongly, we sit here and we're like, that's all wrong. It's actually this, and most of the time we're right. So I'll take that because we get. I threw Indiana -3.5. I'm like, that's a bit high, but whatever. And it wasn't even close. I was like, oh yeah, I've won. It's good. But yeah, it's crazy how people galaxy brain themselves in thinking some of these hires are amazing when in actuality it's the worst hire you've ever seen. But yeah, again, it's just he was never really a special assistant. What's GA?
That's student assistant and then
Student.
graduate assistant.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's so much better. Yeah, then running backs coach.
So,
Like again, like this, he was not qualified. He was not qualified for this
no.
position. And but again, he was an alum, which is one, never a great sign, and two, then yeah, like that's
Oh, yeah. The players wanted him too, by the way. I forgot to point out. Yeah. Where have I heard that in Los Angeles? Oh, yeah. Clay Helton. How did that work out?
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I tried to blow this up. This is a little bit of a tough read, but I definitely understand your point here.
Yeah, so this week's Narduzzi Award goes to Kentucky, and specifically Mark Stoops there at Kentucky. This definitely deserves highlighting. So I did not watch this live, but I heard about this. So Kentucky was down 13-12 against the number one ranked team in the country, the favorite to win the college football playoff again. They were down by one, and they had the ball first and 10 at UGA 49-yard line. So then they ran it, incomplete pass. So now you're stuck at 4th and 8 on the University of Georgia 47-yard line. So you're on your opponent's 47-yard line. There's 3 minutes left in the game. Instead of they had a false start for some reason. I think it was on I'm not sure exactly what it was, but instead of trying to go for it, they decided to punt it, and then Georgia was able to run out the clock, and then basically they punted it back, and then Kentucky was able to do nothing left in that game. Now, the thing is, you always needed to stop, right? You always needed it, even if you like. This is the problem, right? Let's say, so in their scenario, they said, okay, fine. We're gonna punt the ball deep. We're gonna pin them deep and get the stop, and then we can stop them and get the ball back. Okay, sounds like a plan. But you then need to one get the stop, and then you get the ball back, and then you have to march down the length of the field and score again, right? But the thing is, again, you do have to stop them. You're saying we now have to rely on the defense to stop them.
Hmm.
Alternatively, if you get the first down, you could go down and you could kill the clock, and then you can kick an end of basically game-ending field goal, and then that's it. They don't get the ball again. They don't have a chance to do it. Now their offense had scored 13 points. Their offense had scored 12 points, but I'm not really trusting their defense. Like at some point they're going to break out, right? Like, and again, you're playing at house money at this point. You vastly outperformed any sort of expectations on you whatsoever. I do not understand why the default here was not to go for it on 4th and 9, or at minimum be a little bit more aggressive on 2nd and 3rd. To be ambitious to pin them deep, to then hope to get a stop, to then hope to get the ball in good field position, to then hopefully get like, why would you do that? You get the first down, you kill the clock, kick your field goal to end the game. That's it, done. That's how you're supposed to do this. But a very questionable decision here, and you could have knocked off Georgia, but you didn't, and that's where we're at now. So yeah,
I will always also point out too that if you're in that mindset where you think you can punt and get the ball back, and you're going to let Georgia run some clock in that process, you cannot take over 3.5 minutes to get 35 yards here. You need to do a lot better, a lot quicker than that. Unless you're saying, yeah, we're going for it no matter what, you've got to do it at a much quicker pace than they did here. I think that he painted himself into a bad spot by screwing around. And yeah, that not a fireable offense, but Jesus. And especially to beat the number one team or the then number one team. Not good, Mr. Stoops, especially after coming off that loss to South Carolina. The SEC below the top is weird. I'll just say that. There's a lot of weird stuff going on there between Kentucky and South Carolina and who might be good in a particular week. So, all right, noted for future reference, as we just talked about with Kentucky there and Georgia coming out barely with a win. We saw this also with LSU at South Carolina. I had forgotten about one of my favorite angles, and we just saw it there in both those games. That first conference road game is tricky. It is tricky, and it is especially tricky when you don't expect it. When you're expecting a walkover against a team like a South Carolina or a Kentucky that's not necessarily top tier, Those are the ones you really need to look out for, because I think the big games your players can get more worked up for. But I think those some of these other ones like those two, that's where you have those weird home teams covering in spots that just you wouldn't really necessarily think so. Washington, this is tough for them. They lost to Washington State. I was looking at the numbers and I thought, man, it looks like Washington should have won this game. So I just ran it through my metrics and I have a post game win probability of 72%. They found a way to lose one they really should have won. Now, I didn't see the game. It was on Peacock, I think. But apparently, on the decisive last play of Washington's possession, they went for an option on fourth down with Will Rogers, which is an interesting choice. Man, just found a way to not win one they really should have. Central Florida, my gosh. I don't really like per game numbers, but this one is just amazing context. They're running for almost 7 yards per rush and 370 per game. And we'll get into in part two, we'll get in a little bit, but man, that offense is really something. I think that as someone that's on Iowa State to win the Big 12, I think this actually might be the sneaky team that I have to be worried about.
Yeah, they're actually like the Big 12 is completely wide open at this point. Like you can make an argument if you said like Iowa State, Arizona State, sent like UCF. I think either of those could win. Utah is apparently I don't I, like Cam Rising was apparently fine and he's so fine he didn't play this week. Yeah, like the Big 12 is wide open. It could be like even Arizona State is in the mix for that. But yeah, like Iowa State is good, but yeah, the winner of the Big 12 is going to be a fascinating one to see who wins that one.
Sunbelt preview. Will Hall, we said he's just done a horrible job at Southern Miss. I had them as a possible like bottom five team in the country. Maybe I just mispegged them, but I didn't bring it up in the pod. Then I just took another look at the end of last week and I saw, geez, why is South Florida giving only 12 and a half to Southern Miss? It can't be because it's a road game, can it? And so I grabbed South Florida and then it actually dropped to 11 and a half, which just really made it sound weird. I thought there's just something wrong here. And then Southern Miss somehow went out to a 14-0 lead after for the first two possessions. Now, South Florida actually made it a no contest and they usually covered, but that was just weird. That was the whole somebody knows something's going to happen early. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but they did win and they did cover. So
Easily, yeah, at
yeah,
the end, but it's almost like somebody had, I don't know.
someone had the
I'd love to know. I'd love to ask the people that bet that. What do you have here? Yeah, they had the script. Thank you. I was interested in Houston because they just got thrashed by UNLV in that opener. They've had two really good defensive games since then. I just said, look, I'm just curious their defensive apex by game. So they actually did a good job against UNLV at a 76, and then their next two games, holding Oklahoma to a 39, that's nice, and then Rice to a negative 26. Now Rice stinks, but this is actually a pretty good pass defense, and I think we're going to get into them in part two here. But didn't see that coming. I thought that was a long rebuild. And Willie Fritz is an offensive side of the ball coach, but I think there's some signs that they're actually maybe possibly bettable this season if you just undo that UNLV game.
yeah. It's that's the thing, right? They look bad against UNLV, but UNLV looks pretty good,
Yeah,
right? So
no,
this is the thing where you're like, that looks bad, but also then so you're like, oh, they lost to UNLV, that must be bad, but that team might be actually good. And then they were very competitive against Oklahoma, and then they blew out
yeah.
Rice. And Oklahoma is TBD at this point. They're getting their first real test this week against Tennessee, but again, though, yeah, Houston might actually be not bad. We'll see that one, and that one's interesting for me. I think there's gonna be some Houston betting opportunities soon.
And you can toss that UNLV game, the very first game under a new coach against a team that returned a lot, including one of their two best players from the prior season, really just seemed to be on track too. So I can easily throw that out. You mentioned how bad Air Force was. Guess who's even worse and also in the same conference? Wyoming. These are brutal numbers. Wyoming is 3.1 yards per play. That includes even that game against Idaho. Maybe that's juicing up that Idaho ranking that you talked about. But Air Force is not far behind at a horrible 3.3 yards per play. That is some. There's. I don't know. I should have checked if these two teams play, but there's going to be some brutal watches in the Mountain West with these two teams involved.
Yeah, that was also something we called too, right? We said, hey, like Wyoming is going to regress massively after losing their head coach after he retired, and they did. right? And that's the thing. And it's funny how we with just knowledge of the game and thinking about things logically, you can really kind of math out, hey, this team is good, or hey, this team is not good, right? It's really funny how far that will get you, right? Yeah, I think it's really cool.
Looking at my phone here, September 28th, a week from this upcoming September, Air Force at Wyoming. Mark your calendars, boys and girls. That's going to be a good one.
Yes.
That has 6-3 written all over it.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite preseason bets was Kennesaw State under 2.5 wins. They have a really annoying habit of starting out relatively hot and making me reconsider if I'm just completely wrong. So I actually broke this down. On their first drive of 3 games, they actually have 145 yards and 13 points, which doesn't sound a lot. But then if you look for the rest of the game, 500 yards and 23 points. Hey, if you don't catch them on the first drive, you're basically looking at 170 yards and a touchdown for the rest of the game. Not a lot of fun. I'm just hoping there's something there that their prep truly exceeds their talent there. And then I'm safe under the 2.5.
Yeah, I it's interesting. I still think they're not good, but they're maybe showing a bit more life than we had thought, slash maybe we had hoped. So we'll have to see that. But again, they're going to go into the Conference USA. I think our under is going to be okay, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see.
Yeah. All right. And with that, Robert, thank you, college football, for being the best sport that we've ever known. That does it for our look back at week 3. Check back in for the week 4 preview in the next episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We appreciate everybody. Our numbers have gone up and up, and we really appreciate it. And we hope to keep delivering you a good product. Robert, I will see you in the week 4 preview.